You know, they say you are what you eat. If that's the case, I'm cheap, useless junk that you're better off not having in your life. I just made myself sad. Greetings and welcome to the Fan Perspective. I'm your host Nathan Nile, and this will be the final episode of WNBA Weekly for the 2017 regular season. That's right, we are entering the final week of the WNBA's 2017 regular season. I will be covering the playoffs. The format will change for that. It's going to be the same thing I did last year. So we'll go ahead and just show you your current standings. And for today's episode, I'm going to concentrate entirely on the playoff picture and the outlook. So to make this as quick as possible, you've got Minnesota and LA. They're both guaranteed a semifinal game. The number one seed is still technically wide open, but Minnesota has a slight lead, so all they have to do is keep winning and they're in. But even if they do manage to lose, LA still has to win every single game to get their number one. But no one can take them out of those top two. Then you've got New York. They're guaranteed a top 4 seed. They're 4 right now. They could move up to number 3 if Connecticut starts losing. Connecticut in the number 3 seed. They hold on to that if they keep winning. But if they lose every game from here to the rest of the season, they could get knocked down to 5 because Washington would own the tiebreaker over them. They have one more game against them. Washington, one of the most interesting teams to watch. They're in 5th place. They can't pass New York because of the tiebreaker, but they have one more game against Connecticut and they've split so far this season. So if Washington wins out and Connecticut loses out, they would have tie records with Washington owning the tiebreaker. So Washington would take 4th place. Connecticut would fall down to 5. Washington, the most interesting team on this list because if they win out, they could potentially get to 4th place, even though that is a very long shot. At the same time, though, they do not own the tiebreaker over any of the teams below them. So if Washington loses every single game from here to the end of the season, they could end up being knocked all the way down to 7 by Dallas and Phoenix. Phoenix, if they win out, they could get up to 5th. If they lose out, they could get knocked down to 17th. Dallas, they could get up to 5th. They could get knocked out of the playoffs completely. Seattle, same thing. They could get up to about 6th, or they could get knocked out completely. Chicago, basically, they are in the playoffs right now. Chicago, more than anyone else, they have to be feeling that playoff pressure because Chicago, they are not officially eliminated, but it's a very outside chance. They have to win all 3 of their remaining games, and they have to hope that either Dallas or Seattle, at least one of those teams, doesn't win anything. Actually, they would have to hope that Dallas doesn't win either of their 2 games, but with Seattle, Chicago, as long as they win all 3 of theirs, then then that win over Seattle automatically puts them into the playoffs and knocking Seattle down to the 9th seed because that's the tiebreaker game. That said, if the Storm beat the Mystics on Friday, they can still lose to the Sky and be in the playoffs if Dallas loses both of their games this week. So, Phoenix and Washington are in, but they're still battling for position. If Chicago loses just 1 game, doesn't even matter which team they lose to, Dallas automatically gets into the playoffs. But if the Storm lose their Friday game, then it would come down to that final matchup against Chicago. And so Chicago could still lose 1 game this year and still get into the playoffs as long as that 1 game is not against Seattle. If they lose, they can lose to either the Lynx or the Wings and still have an outside shot of getting in as long as Seattle finishes the season with 3 straight losses. So that, in a nutshell, is your playoff picture. Those are the storylines to pay attention to down the stretch. So with all that in mind, I'm going to move on to the games that are being played this week, the last games that are being played for the regular season. So be sure to tune in. I will tell you all the ones that are being broadcast nationally, and for the rest, check your local listings, or you can watch every single game on WNBA League Pass. And do not forget the times that I'm showing you are all Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to adjust for your time zone. There are so many games this week that have interesting storylines for both teams involved. If the Sun beat the Mystics on Tuesday, they guarantee themselves a top 4 seed. If the Sky lose to the Wings on Wednesday, then the Wings clinch themselves a playoff berth. If the Lynx beat the Sky on Friday, they could end up clinching the number 1 seed for themselves. They could potentially be giving Dallas the playoff berth or Seattle. And as of recording this, Sunday's games, they all have significance for the teams that are active. Like there's the Sky versus the Storm. That game could mean absolutely nothing. The Storm could already have a playoff berth clinched and be resting people getting ready for the playoffs. But it's also potential that whoever wins that game gets the 8th seed. So I really can't tell you right now how important it will be, but just know that every single one of those games could bear some significance. So the final game of the season could be one of the most exciting weekends to finish on, or it could be just, who cares, we just have to do this because it's on the schedule. We're already moving on. We know where we are. Either way, I plan to watch it. I'm going to be paying a lot of attention, and I hope you will too. And this is it. This is the final edition of WNBA Weekly. I will be back for the 2018 season, and before then, we've got the playoffs. I will be covering them on a game-by-game basis, and then we've got, of course, the off-season power rankings, and then the preseason power rankings, and then, sometime in May, when the regular season returns, so will WNBA Weekly. Thank you for sticking with me all season, for those of you who have been here since the beginning, especially those of you who have been here for a few years. And, my name is Nneka. This has been The Fan Perspective, and until the next time you see me in a video, I hope you have a good week.